On June 29, 1992, the last legal successor to Seidel Naumann was formally dissolved in Dresden, Germany. The factory on Hamburgerstrasse had already gone quiet the year before. Over 120 years of manufacturing gone. But rewind to August 5, 1868. A 23-year-old mechanic named Bruno Naumann opened a one-room workshop in Dresden with a few hundred thalers in savings. From that single room, his company became the largest sewing and typewriter manufacturer in all of Germany. How and why did it end? Germany's sewing machine boom. In 1851, an American inventor named Isaac Merritt Singer redesigned the sewing machine for practical, everyday use. Germany noticed immediately. Within years, over 200 German companies rushed into sewing machine production. Saxony, the industrial heartland of Eastern Germany, became the center of that manufacturing explosion. Factories opened in cities across the region. Dresden alone had at least 3 major manufacturers operating by 1868. Sewing machines were not simple products. They required precision-machined metal parts, gears, bearings, and threaded components that demanded skilled engineering. Any factory that could build sewing machines well had the tools and knowledge to build almost anything mechanical. That detail matters. It explains everything that came next. Bruno Naumann. Bruno Naumann was born on October 10, 1844, in Dresden. His father was a stocking manufacturer. Naumann showed a talent for mathematics early in school. After school, he trained as a precision mechanic and a watchmaker, 2 trades that required an obsessive attention to tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. During his journeyman years, the standard practice for young German craftsmen was to travel and work under different masters. Naumann worked in Berlin, Frankfurt am Main, and Vienna before returning to Dresden. He arrived back in his home city with a specific set of skills and very little money. On August 5, 1868, Naumann founded a small precision mechanics workshop in Dresden using savings of just a few hundred thalers. A thaler was worth roughly 3 days of an average worker's wage. He was starting with almost nothing. In 1869, 1 year after opening, he began producing sewing machines under license from Wheeler and Wilson. Wheeler and Wilson was an American sewing machine company based in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They held key patents on the rotary hook mechanism that made modern sewing machines work. German manufacturers who wanted to produce quality machines had to pay for those patents. Naumann did. Orders came quickly. The machines sold well. But Naumann had a problem. He was growing faster than his capital could support. Emil Seidel enters. In 1869, a Dresden merchant named Emil Seidel invested 25,000 thalers into Naumann's workshop. That was a significant sum. For context, Naumann had started the entire business with a few hundred thalers. Seidel's investment was roughly 100 times that amount. From 1870, the company traded under the name Seidel Naumann. Seidel stayed for 6 years. In 1876, he demanded his money back and exited the business with a settlement of 250,000 marks. 10 times what he had originally invested, paid out in a different currency that reflected the company's growth. The name Seidel Naumann stayed unchanged. The company that bore 2 names now belonged, in practice, to one man, and that man was about to build something much larger than a sewing machine workshop, building the factory. By the early 1870s, Seidel Naumann was already outgrowing its original workshop. The sewing machine business was working, orders were consistent, workers were being hired, but Naumann had a larger ambition than filling a single workshop with seamstress machines. In 1872, he made a decision that separated Seidel Naumann from every other sewing machine manufacturer in Germany. He became the first company in the country to produce high-armed sewing machines built on the Singer design, the most advanced sewing machine construction available at the time, and then immediately began improving on it. This was not a copy, it was an upgrade. The Singer high-arm design allowed fabric to move freely under the machine arm. That feature made it far more useful for large garments and industrial work. Naumann licensed the principle and then engineered it further. Every year the machine got better. Every year the orders grew. By 1883, the original workshop could no longer contain the operation. Naumann purchased a large plot of land on Hamburger Strasse in the Friedrichstadt district of Dresden. He built a proper factory there, a purpose-built industrial facility designed to scale. 3 years later, in May 1886, Seidel and Naumann converted to a joint stock corporation. At that moment, the factory employed 1,000 workers and was producing 80,000 sewing machines every single year. That is 80,000 precision-machined mechanical devices, built by hand in one factory in 1 year, expanding the product line. The new factory on Hamburger Strasse was large. It had space for more than sewing machines. Around 1892, Seidel and Naumann began mass-producing bicycles under the brand name Germania. The bicycle was not a leisure product in 1892. The German army used the Germania. The German postal service used the Germania. It was infrastructure on 2 wheels, and Seidel and Naumann was supplying it at scale. From 1887, the factory also produced musical automata, mechanical coin-operated music players, and precision speedometers for locomotives. These were not random additions. They were precision mechanical instruments. They used the same engineering skills, the same machine tools, and the same trained workforce that built sewing machines. Naumann understood something that most factory owners of his era did not. A precision engineering operation is not defined by what it makes. It is defined by how tight its tolerances are. If you can build a sewing machine, you can build a bicycle. If you can build a bicycle, you can build a speedometer. In the final years of Naumann's life, the factory held over 100 patents and was producing, every single working day, 400 sewing machines, 165 bicycles, and 40 typewriters. Those typewriters were new, and they were about to change everything. The ideal typewriter, 1900. In the late 1890s, the typewriter market was dominated by American machines. The Underwood typewriter, produced in New York, had set the standard for office typewriters in 1895. It was the machine every office manager in the world recognized. It was reliable, widely available, and backed by American industrial scale. No German company had successfully challenged it. In autumn 1897, Naumann received an offer from America. 2 inventors, Edwin Barney and Frank Tanner, had designed a new typewriter mechanism. They needed a manufacturing partner. Naumann saw the opportunity clearly. The purchase contract was signed in 1899. Edwin Barney personally travelled to Dresden to set up the production line. In September 1900, the first Ideal typewriter left the factory. The Ideal was the first German visible writing machine with a front strike mechanism. Before front strike designs, a typist could not see what they were typing until they manually lifted the paper carriage. The Ideal printed where the typist could see it immediately as they typed. It had a 4-row keypad with 42 writing keys. Combined with a switching mechanism, those 42 keys produced 84 different characters. For its time, that was a serious machine. By 1901, the original Ideal A was already replaced by an improved Ideal A2. Only a small number of the first model were ever produced. Seidel and Naumann had not waited to see if customers wanted better. They built better before customers could ask. By 1903, Seidel and Naumann had already produced 10,000 Ideal typewriters. The machine earned worldwide recognition. It could be custom ordered with different keyboards and tabulator systems. Offices in multiple countries were buying it. The Ideal was a serious challenge to American dominance. Germany had entered the typewriter market, and it had entered it at the top. Bruno Naumann dies January 22, 1903. Bruno Naumann did not live to see where the ideal went. On January 22nd, 1903, Naumann died of a stroke in Loschwitz, a village east of Dresden. He was 58 years old. At the time of his death, his factory employed 2,500 workers. He had started with a few hundred thalers and a one-room workshop 35 years earlier. In those 35 years, he had built the largest sewing machine and typewriter manufacturer in Germany, held over 100 patents, and was shipping products to customers across Europe and beyond. His son, Walter Naumann, took over the company. The factory kept running. The ideal kept selling. And 7 years after Naumann's death, the company introduced the product that would carry his family's name longer than anything else he ever built, the Erika, 1910. In 1910, typewriters were heavy. A standard office typewriter weighed between 10 and 15 kilograms. They sat on desks. They stayed on desks. Moving one required effort, and most people saw no reason to move them at all. Typewriters belonged in offices, and offices were fixed locations. That assumption was the problem Seidel and Naumann decided to solve. On January 28, 1910, the company applied to the Imperial Patent Office in Berlin to register a new trademark for a new typewriter. The name on the application was Erika. The registration was confirmed on August 3, 1910. The name Erika came from a person. Hermine Marie Erika Naumann was Bruno Naumann's only granddaughter. She was born in 1907. She was 3 years old when her grandfather's company named its most important product after her. The Erika No. 1 was the first folding portable typewriter in the world. Every typewriter before it was a fixed, rigid machine. The Erika folded. The entire carriage mechanism pivoted forward and collapsed over the keyboard, reducing the machine to a size that fit inside a small carrying case. A writer could carry it in one hand. The Erika No. 1 had 3 key rows. That was one fewer than the ideal office typewriter. To compensate, each key was triple assigned. Pressing a single key with different shift combinations produced 3 different characters. The machine was smaller, lighter, and still capable of producing a wide range of characters. No other typewriter manufacturer in the world had done this. Seidel and Naumann had not just made a portable typewriter, they had invented the category. The Erika sold immediately and consistently. It was produced under multiple brand names for export. In Britain and France, it was sold as the Bijou. In other markets, it carried the name Gloria. The machine itself was identical. Only the badge on the front changed. By the 1920s, the Erika line had grown into multiple models. The Erika Model 3 was produced between 1923 and 1925. Each new model refined the design. The carriage got stronger. The case got lighter. The key action got sharper. By the 1930s, Seidel and Naumann had stopped making bicycles entirely. The last Germania rolled out of the factory in 1938. Typewriter manufacturing had become the company's largest operation. The Erika Model M, produced through the 1930s, was the peak of that development. It had a one-piece outer shell, a reinforced carriage rail, and glass-topped keys ringed in silver. It came stored in a leather case, with a cleaning brush clipped inside the lid. It was precise, portable, and built to last. The factory that had started with sewing machines was now first and foremost a typewriter company, and its most important product was about to be put to work by the most destructive military force in European history. The war comes to Hamburger Strasse. By the late 1930s, Seidel and Naumann was no longer just a civilian manufacturer. The German military had adopted the Erika as standard field equipment. The SS ordered a custom version. It was mechanically identical to the civilian model, with one difference: the number 3 key was replaced with a key bearing the SS runic symbol. These machines were not rare curiosities. They were issued equipment, produced in volume, used daily to process the paperwork of the Third Reich. The factory on Hamburger Strasse was running at full capacity. By the start of World War II, Seidel and Naumann employed 8,000 workers. Every shift, the building produced typewriters for soldiers, bureaucrats, and officers across the German war machine. Then came 1944. The Allied bombing campaign had largely avoided Dresden through most of the war. The city was not a primary industrial target in the early years, but by 1944 that had changed. Air raids struck Dresden in 1944 and again in February 1945. The Hamburgerstrasse factory took severe damage. The machines that survived kept running. The workers who remained kept showing up. But the war was ending, and what came next would finish what the bombs had started. Expropriation, 1945 and 1946. Germany surrendered in May 1945. Dresden fell inside the Soviet occupation zone, the territory that would become the German Democratic Republic, commonly known as East Germany. The Soviet administration that took control of the zone had a clear and immediate policy toward private industrial enterprises. They were to be transferred to state ownership, without compensation. Seidel Naumann, which had operated as a private company since Bruno Naumann founded it with his own savings in 1868, was expropriated in 1945 and 1946. The owners received nothing. The factory, the patents, the machinery, the brand names, the tooling, the workforce of 8,000 people, all of it became property of the state overnight. To understand what this meant in practice, consider what Seidel Naumann was at the moment it was taken. It was 77 years old. It had survived the First World War, the hyperinflation of the 1920s, the Great Depression, and the Second World War. It had 8,000 employees. It held over 100 patents. It had built more than 10,000 ideal typewriters by 1903 alone, and the Erika line had been in continuous production for 35 years. All of that was now state property. The Erika Model M continued production for a short time after the war under the original Seidel Naumann name. But in 1949, that name was formally removed from the operation. The factory became the VEB Schreibmaschinenwerk Dresden, which translates directly as the People's Enterprise Typewriter Works Dresden. The name Seidel Naumann was gone from the legal record. The Erika survives under a new owner. The East German government kept making the Erika. They had no reason to stop. The machine was well engineered, widely known, and in demand. The Erika brand had built 35 years of market recognition before the state took ownership of it. Writers across East Germany used Erikas. Government offices used Erikas. Schools used Erikas. In 1951, the Typewriter Works merged with the former Clemensmüller AG, another expropriated Dresden manufacturer, and the combined operation continued under the name VEB Schreibmaschinenwerk Dresden. The Erika kept evolving. New models replaced old ones. In 1952, the glass keys that had defined the pre-war Erika were replaced with plastic. In 1954, a new model, the Erika 11, replaced the pre-war models 8 and 9. The factory trained approximately 300 apprentices every year through its own vocational school. The workforce remained around 3,500 people. The Erika was also one of East Germany's most consistent export products. It left the factory with different names depending on the destination. In some markets it was sold as the Bijou, in others the Gloria, the Ursula, the Privileg, or the Präsident. The machine inside the case was identical regardless of what the badge on the front said. By the end of production, the Erika line had been produced in more than 30 distinct models, with 109 different keyboard configurations available on customer request. Total production across the entire Erika line, from the first number 1 in 1910 through to the final machine in 1991, exceeded 8 million units. The Erika was the most frequently produced portable typewriter ever manufactured in Germany. The state had inherited something genuinely valuable, and for decades, it worked. Robotron, 1969 and 1979. In 1969, the East German government created a new industrial combine, A combine, in the East German economic system, was a state-controlled group of factories and enterprises organised under central management. The combine was called VEB Kombinat Robotron. Its headquarters were in Dresden. Its purpose was to coordinate the production of computers, data processing equipment, and office technology across the GDR. By 1989, Robotron employed 68,000 people. The Erika works did not join Robotron immediately. Through the 1970s, the typewriter factory operated under a different combine called Zentronic. On January 1, 1978, Zentronic was dissolved. Its enterprises, including the Dresden Typewriter Works, the direct successor to Seidel Naumann's factory on Hamburger Straße, were absorbed into Robotron. The integration took effect in 1979. From 1979, the Erika typewriter was an output of the same state combine that built East Germany's mainframe computers. That is worth sitting with for a moment. The machine that Bruno Naumann's granddaughter was named after in 1910 was now being manufactured inside the same organisation that built the GDR's most advanced computing hardware. The Erika had travelled from a private precision workshop to the flagship technology combine of a communist state. Production continued under the Erika name. The machines kept improving. In 1984, a new model, the Erika E100, sold for 420 East German marks. That was roughly half of an average worker's monthly wage. People bought them anyway. The wall falls and so does the factory. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. East Germany ceased to exist as a separate state. The political and economic system that had owned the Erika factory for 44 years collapsed in a matter of weeks. German reunification followed in October 1990. For Robotron, reunification was immediate and catastrophic. On June 30, 1990, the day the monetary, economic, and social union between East and West Germany took effect, Kombinat Robotron was liquidated. Its 68,000 employees were now working for a dissolved organisation. The divisions were converted into separate corporations and pushed into the open market. Less than 5% of those 68,000 workers found positions in the successor companies. That means more than 64,600 people lost their jobs in a single restructuring. The Erika Typewriter Works was privatised under the name Robotron Erika GmbH. It was now a private company for the first time since 1945, competing in a German market that was suddenly open to Japanese electronic typewriters, Western word processors, and personal computers. There was no realistic path forward. The manual portable typewriter had no future in a market that already had the personal computer. Production stopped in 1991. The last Erika typewriter left the factory on Hamburger Straße, the same building Bruno Naumann had constructed in 1883, and then the line went silent. On June 29, 1992, Robotron Erika GmbH was formally dissolved and entered liquidation. The legal process ran for 5 more years. On August 21, 1997, the company was officially extinguished. What remained? The building on Hamburger Straße was sold in 1991. The city of Dresden repurposed it as a municipal administrative centre. Hermine Marie Erika Naumann, the woman the typewriter was named after, born in 1907, was still alive when the last machine bearing her name rolled off the production line. She died in 2000 at the age of 92. She had outlived the product named after her by 9 years. The Erika brand was not transferred to any continuing manufacturer. The ideal brand followed the same path. No production of either name continued anywhere in the world after 1991. Seidel Naumann had started as a one-room precision workshop in 1868. It became Germany's largest sewing machine and typewriter manufacturer. It held over 100 patents, produced 80,000 sewing machines per year at its peak, and manufactured more than 8 million typewriters across 81 years of continuous Erika production. It survived 2 world wars, was absorbed by a communist state, and then outlasted that state by less than 2 years before the market ended it permanently. The machines still exist. Over 8 million Erikas were built. Collectors find them in attics, estate sales and flea markets across Europe to this day. They still type. If you found this story worth your time, subscribe and leave a like only if this earned it.